Hi, my name is Ann V. Brady, and I will be reading an excerpt from my book, Chapter 3, A New Beginning, the story of my adoption, life, and service, illustrated by Eric C. Brady. One day I heard my brothers talking about the fact that our dad would always correct their homework before he allowed them to turn it in to school. He would proofread everything they wrote and make corrections, show them the corrections to be made, ripped up the report, and made them rewrite it. I asked my dad why he didn't do that with my homework. My dad said he didn't have to because my homework was always right. My junior year in high school, my favorite teacher was Mr. Zimmerman. Mr. Zimmerman taught chemistry. In fact, in the first class, he showed us a neat experiment. While he was performing the experiment, he was also teaching us laboratory safety. Mr. Zimmerman, while holding a tube with clamps, added chemicals to the tube, and while holding the tube facing the wall, he heated the tube over a Bunsen burner. The class looked on in amazement as what looked like eraser shavings exploded into the air over the tube. The class was hooked on chemistry after that. I did well in chemistry, and Mr. Zimmerman told me he thought I should become a doctor. I asked him about becoming a veterinarian. Mr. Zimmerman told me that it was easier and shorter to become a doctor than a veterinarian. He said he knew this because his daughter was studying to be a veterinarian. The only annoying thing about chemistry class was somewhere in the semester we started having fire drills. Someone would call in a bomb scare during third period, which is when chemistry class was. We would have to evacuate the building. There never was a bomb. Mr. Zimmerman told us at one time when there was a bomb scare, the police looked in everybody's lockers. They opened one locker which had a huge jar full of liquid. The police took the jar for analysis, thinking that it was nitroglycerin. Mr. Zimmerman knew this student and told us that the jar held pond water. He also told us that as big as the jar was, if it were nitroglycerin, it would have blown up the whole building. Something Sometime either in my sophomore or junior year, I took a speech class. I had always shied from speaking in front of an audience. It scared me. We had to pick a topic, research it, and give a speech in front of the class. I found my topic, oddly enough, while reading an article about the plight of Native Americans in Reader's Digest. After reading the article and doing research, I wrote my speech. I went up to the podium at the front of the class when I was called. I had trouble starting at first, but amazingly, I found the courage. As I was speaking, I started to choke up a little, not because of the sadness of my speech, but because I was nervous. As I left the podium to return to my seat, my legs started to buckle underneath me. Fortunately, I made it back to my seat without fainting. Teachers of America, we got out of the meeting early and I had to wait for the bus for about 45 minutes to an hour. It was in the middle of the winter and cold out. I decided that I didn't want to wait for the bus, so I figured I could walk all the way home and get home at the same time as the bus. I walked home and I was getting close to home. My cousin Tommy picked me up and drove me the rest of the way home. Tommy chewed me out for walking all the way home in the cold. I thanked him for driving me home and told him I didn't realize how cold it was outside. I also took intermediate algebra and trigonometry in my junior year. Mr. P taught it. While I enjoyed the class, Mr. P could be very boring. Mr. P always wore an Irish cap, glasses, and a bow tie. I did very well in his class, and at the end of the year, Mr. P suggested I take probability and statistics in my senior year. I decided that probability and statistics would be very boring, so I opted to take advanced algebra in my senior year instead. I took French for the third year in a row. I took an art class where I learned to paint, do ceramics, and other art projects. One project that we were taught was how to make ceramic figures. We were taught how to beat and cut the clay to get out the air bubbles. I made a dog, at least that is what it was supposed to be. It was fired and then glazed. Then I glazed it two different colors. Teacher told me after the first firing that the figure was supposed to be hollowed out, not solid. She was surprised it didn't explode. Dog ended up looking like the ugliest dog you have ever seen. The head and tail were dark brown and the body was a light yellowish brown. You could see the rings around the neck and tail where the glaze had melted the two colors together. I was still proud of it as I made it myself. One day my cousin Tommy showed up in art class. People couldn't believe we were related. We told them our grandmas were sisters. In English class, I took classic literature such as Beowulf and El Cid. I also took Western literature and plays written by Henrik Ibsen. In the class where we read the plays of Henrik Ibsen, some of the students acted out the parts in the play as they read the plays. The plays we read were Ghost and A Doll's House. I was picked to play the mother in Ghost, and the teacher was impressed with how I acted. In fact, he asked the other students to listen to a tape of the original actress doing the part of the mother. He then asked the students who read the part better. All the students said that I read it better than she did. The students all felt that she overacted. In Western literature, we read books by Louis L'Amour and other authors. One book I remember reading was The Oxbow Incident. Our teacher also recommended that we watch the movie The Oxbow Incident, telling us that it was an excellent movie. Reading books like El Cid and Beowulf got me interested in trying to find other similar adventure stories. I discovered Don Quixote by Miguel Cervantes. I thoroughly enjoyed the book. It was full of adventure and misadventure. It was lighthearted, yet the ending was incredibly sad. In fact, it was the only book I ever read that made me cry. So I was extremely excited to find out that the movie Men of La Mancha was going to air on TV. The weekend it was airing, I was supposed to do my dad's books. I told him in advance about the movie being on during the weekend. I told him I would do his books on Sunday, and he said that was fine. The night I was going to watch the movie, my dad decided that he wanted the books done right away, and I refused. I watched the movie and was surprised that it was a musical. I ended up not really enjoying the movie. I don't know if I didn't like it because it was a musical or because I was upset about my argument with my dad. That night when I told him good night, I love you, he just looked at me and went upstairs to bed without saying a word. It hurt my feelings because I always said good night, I love you. I felt like he was withholding his love because he was mad at me. I did his books on Sunday and all was forgiven. I always did his books at the desk in my parents' bedroom. Biggest problem with that was that my mom would always place her chewed gum somewhere on the desk or the chair. One time I sat down with the adding machine to do his books. I got stuck to the chair I sat in as my mother had laid her gum on the seat. I had to have a discussion with her about that and ask her to watch where she laid her gum. I started noticing that an old friend of mine, Margaret, who I had fallen out with when I was younger, was now on the school bus with me going home. Every day she would sit behind me on the bus and annoy me. She would punch me in the back, hit me, or kick me under the seat. She wouldn't get off at her stop, but waited and got off at my stop. She would then stick her leg out and try to trip me. One day the bus had a fire drill. We had to push open the back of the door and get off the bus in an orderly fashion. I was behind her getting off the bus and bumped into her, pushing her forward several times as the bus was crowded. She turned around, giving me a nasty look, but could do nothing about it. Needless to say, she never bothered me again, which made me happy. Another time that year, I was going from one class to another, walking down the hall. I passed a boy at his locker. He was staring at me as I walked past. As I got near my classroom, he slammed me face first into the wall. I turned around with my eyes closed and pushed him away with my hands. He had the audacity to say I touched him in his private parts. I just looked at him, and I turned around. I walked into the classroom and sat down at my seat. A friend of my brother Bob's, Paul, worked for my father at his gas station in Connecticut. After Paul got out of the military, he had started gaining weight. He decided to go on a coffee diet. The coffee diet consists of drinking only coffee all day long and not eating at all during the day until dinner time. He lost weight, but I thought at the time it was very foolish of him, considering that it is very unhealthy. One day, one of my father's employees came up to him and my brothers and said there was a man who was selling TVs out of the back of his van. They asked who's going to go with the man to get the TVs and wanted to know if anyone else wanted in. He said it would only cost $25 per person for the TVs. Everyone chipped in and gave the employee their money. After half an hour, the employee returned, minus the TVs. He explained that when they went over the bridge, he was forced out of the car and made to strip, and the money was stolen. He was forced to walk back to the station on foot. Everyone was mad at him and said they thought that he knew him and that's why they gave him their money. He said he didn't know the guy, he just made the offer and asked if anybody wanted to get in on it. For a while, my brothers Bob and Jim worked with my dad at the Hess station in Connecticut. One Saturday, when I went out with my dad to the station, he decided that he would let me pump gas. I was already pumping gas into our car before we would head home. Now he wanted me to pump gas for the customers. Bob and Jim had a fit. They told him they didn't think I should be exposed to the public. What they were worried about What they were worried about that some customers can get mean and nasty, and they didn't want me to experience that. Eventually, Bob decided to become a gas station owner like my dad. He bought a Crown gas station franchise. Crown, like Hess, only sold gas. In our family, the men were not mechanically inclined. My mom would fix the toilets and sinks in the house when they leaked. I fixed our push lawnmower when it broke or the blades needed adjusting. One day, my dad went up to the gas station. When he went into the back room, he discovered the safe was gone. He called the police to report the theft. After investigating, the police discovered that the thieves had two vehicles. They parked their truck on the freeway behind the gas station. The thieves then climbed up on top of the roof of the gas station office and broke in through the roof. They broke into the back room of the office using the dolly. They loaded the safe onto the dolly, rolled the safe out to the back of the gas station. They pushed the safe downhill to their truck, where it was loaded onto the back of the truck by accomplices and drove away. This time the insurance covered the theft. My father bought another safe and brought in cement to put around the safe to make it harder to steal. One day, as I was dressing for school, I decided to wear jeans, a hot pink bodysuit, and a denim shirt. The denim shirt was buttoned up except for the top button. I was sitting in a classroom before the class started. It started getting hot in the classroom, so I started unbuttoning my denim shirt. One of the male students in front of the class had turned around as I started to unbutton my shirt. He saw me unbuttoning the shirt and turned back towards the front of the classroom. As he turned his face forward, I could see he had a look of astonishment on his face, and he did a double take. When he looked back, he noticed that I had a bodysuit on. Then he turned back front, because he was no longer interested. I'm assuming he thought I was stripping in class. I took driver's ed, which I enjoyed. Class was fun, and we got to practice driving during the class. We went over the rules and regulations and were required to get a learner's permit. I passed the written exam and got my learner's permit. The hardest part was finding someone to go with me so I could practice driving when I was at home. My mom let me drive and I didn't enjoy it. The problem I had was that my mother kept changing what she wanted me to do or how she wanted me to drive. An example of this was I would be driving down the street and she would tell me, when you get to the stop sign, turn left. No, turn right. No, go straight. I would get to the stop sign and have to ask her which way she wanted me to go. One day, She had me out driving, and we ended up trying to get out of a three-way intersection onto a busy road. She apologized to me for that. She forgot the three-way intersection was there. Driving with my father wasn't a whole lot better. He would take me to an empty parking lot on Sundays. He would then have me get in the driver's seat and drive around the parking lot. One day I cut a corner a little too close and started going over one of the islands in the parking lot. I started to press the brake when he started yelling at me, and I hit the gas. I picked I backed up and parked the car. I got out of the car and told him I was never driving with him ever again. One of the things I learned in driver's ed was how to change a tire. Every student had to take turns changing a tire. Eventually it came time for us to take the driving exam to pass driver's ed. My sister-in-law Betty was visiting us, and I asked her to help me practice driving so I could pass my driver's ed exam. I drove while she sat in the passenger side. Betty had me practice U-turns, parallel parking, and just driving around town. We went home, and I parked in front of the house. My dad asked Betty how I was doing on driving. Betty told him that he could get in the back seat and see how well I was driving as long as he kept his mouth shut. After we drove around some more and went back home, my dad said that he was impressed and he thought I did a fairly good job of driving. The next day at school, I passed the driving part of driver's ed. I was so happy to pass driver's ed because I was so worried about it. During the summer, my mother signed me up for driving school. It gave me the practice I needed so I could pass the driver's test the first time around. After finishing driving school, I took the driving test after my 18th birthday and passed the driving part of it and was able to get my license for the first time. One day, a sophomore came up to me at lunch and asked me if he could tell his friends that I asked him to the prom and that he turned me down. I suggested that we could go to the prom together, but he said that he didn't want to do that, so I turned him down. My English teacher, Mr. R, was weird, nice, but weird. He once asked for students who didn't plan to marry to raise their hand. I raised my hand and he asked what I planned to do for a job. I said I was going to be a teacher. He then informed me that I could marry and still be a teacher. I wanted to say that what if I don't want to get married? He also said that women shouldn't get paid the same as men for the same job. I disagreed. He said he deserved more money because he was married and had children. I didn't know what to say to that. Sometime during my junior year, I took both Regent Scholarship exam and the SAT. The Regent Scholarship is only in New York and is only given to students who take advanced placement courses in science, English, social studies, and math and pass the exam. I passed and was given $50 in scholarship money towards college. I applied to two colleges, Hofstra University and Adelphi University. I wanted to go to college out of state in Massachusetts. My mother refused to consider it. She told me that my brothers hated being away from home while they were in college. I figured being as my parents were paying for it, they got to decide if I stayed home and went to college or not. I was accepted by both Hofstra University and Adelphi University. I looked at both colleges and decided to go to Adelphi University. Adelphi was a smaller college and I figured I would easily get lost at Hofstra. In 1972, my nephew Bobby was born to Bob and Betty. Immediately after my nephew was born, Bob called to tell me I had a nephew. He told me then they had named the baby Trampus McCloud. My first thought was that Bob was joking, and I started to say something to that effect. I thought better of it because I was worried that he was actually serious and I didn't want to hurt his feelings about picking such a stupid name. The name Trampus McCloud is derived from two different characters. Trampus is a character from The Virginian. McCloud is from the detective show McCloud. I told them the names were wonderful and I was proud to be an aunt. I finally found out the truth when I talked to my sister-in-law Betty, who informed me that their son's name was Robert. Bobby was born with brown hair and blue eyes and was adorable. Laura loved her little brother, and Betty let her hold him for short periods of time as long as she sat on the couch first. Growing up, the one thing I've always hated, especially as a teenager, was going to the beauty parlor to get my hair done. My hair has always been curly, thick, and unruly. In fact, when I comb my hair, I lose the curl and it ends up being frizzy. Inevitably, I would tell the beautician what hairstyle I would want, and then they would grab my hair, look at it, and say, "Oh, I know exactly what I'm going to do." I've always felt that I should be able to tell the hairstylist what hairstyle I want, and they should cut it that way. I want it, they should cut it the way I wanted them to. When I was in high school, I wanted a shag haircut. The male hairstylist grabbed my hair and said, "I know exactly how I'm going to cut it." He never listened to me and cut the style he wanted to give me. I realize now that the shag is only for people with straight hair, which I have never had. But at the time, he should have told me that rather than just not listening to me. The other problem that I had as a teenager was the fact that I have large and very narrow feet. By the time I was a junior in high school, I wore a 9 to 9.5 4A shoe size. Going to a regular shoe store or a store like J.C. Penney's or Sears was a nightmare. In one store that my mother and I went into looking for shoes that fit me, the shoe clerk, when I tried on a shoe that was too wide, told me that I need to buy that shoe because I wouldn't find a shoe that fit me anywhere anyway. I told the clerk that I wasn't interested in the shoe. My mother and I left. I usually ended up buying shoes from the Naturalizer shoe store. They carried large, narrow shoes that no one else had. The only problem was that they were expensive. And that is all I'm going to read for today. And I appreciate everybody listening to my story. And I hope you all have a nice day today. And be kind to everybody. And please buy my book, A New Beginning, the story of my adoption, life, and service at Amazon.com.